Seek the Heart fans, this is exciting. I finally got my box of books and I'm going to open it up right now. And I am going to show everybody what these beautiful books look like. Wow.
There is some packing involved.
Yeah. Are you ready? Oh, man, that's a pretty book, isn't it? And look, right here, we are best-selling authors. Isn't that amazing?
Well,
Wow.
internet, yeah, actually international best-selling authors too.
International
Wow.
best-selling authors. And we have David here, who is one of the authors, and he is going to talk about his chapter. So, David, I am going to let you take the mic and
Sure,
just tell us about your story.
sure. My chapter is called "Taking You Off Your Training Wheels," and it's based on the story that I wrote about growing up with my son Jamie. When Jamie was 3, he was diagnosed with autism, and not, any parent that has that receives a diagnosis like that, you have a lot of feelings that go along with that. You wonder what's going to happen to your child. Will they grow up to be independent? All these dreams or whatever that you had for your kid, we had those changed because we were told a number of things: that Jamie would never go to a regular school, that he'd never never have a job, never do this, never do that, never even ride a bike because he had a lot of balance issues. And when I was trying to teach him to ride a bike, even with training wheels, he would fall down. He really couldn't keep his balance. We had a lot of therapies that he received. We had a lot of conditioning that we worked with him on, and he still couldn't get that feeling that most kids pick up naturally. And he really, really, really wanted to ride a bike. But he would get so frustrated that when he would fall, he would just take his helmet off, throw it in, and run, crying into the house about how he'd never be able to ride it. And knowing that he really wanted this, I wanted to find a way to help him get that feeling and build that skill, but I couldn't teach him the normal way. So I started researching, how do you teach balance to somebody who doesn't have any? And it kind of went back to that little physics experiment you did in high school where you had the bicycle wheel, you spun it around, then you tried to turn it. What I realized is that the faster that wheel turns, the more you're actually held upright, because it's not your training wheels that give you balance, it's motion. And the more you move forward, the bike balances itself. So, and this was a while back before ever they had made balance bikes and all these other tools that you could use to help your kids learn to ride. And these things are great. But what I had to do, I had to bolt a pole onto the back of his bike so I could hold on to it and walk behind him while he started to learn that balance, because the training wheels weren't helping him because he would lean into them when he felt like he was falling. So I put that on there and started pushing him while he got more motion and got to go faster. And what that did was help build that internal feeling of balance while the bike did a lot of the work for him. So we'd start going down the driveway and down the street. And then eventually I had to run to keep up with him, to keep the bike moving and to make sure he was okay. And what I learned over time was that eventually, no matter how safe I wanted him to be, by me holding onto that bar, I was holding him back. And so what he didn't know was that at some point I wasn't holding on to it. I was just running behind him for safety. And the one time when we rode all the way around the block, he said, "Dad, were you holding on?" And I said, "Jamie, I haven't been holding on for a week." And at that point, he realized that he could ride a bike because he'd been doing it himself, because those skills just came along without him worrying about trying to hold himself up. And that built so many other things that came along with that. Jamie went from riding down the driveway to around the block to riding a mile to riding 5 miles to eventually, when he joined Scouts, he did their cycling merit badge, which has a 5 mile ride, a 10 mile ride, a 25 mile ride, and even a 50 mile ride. And to date, Jamie has ridden 4 century rides with me, 4 100-mile rides with me. So he can ride a bike. But it didn't end there. It built so many other things into his life that came from that accomplishment. That he did graduate from high school. He had with an A average. He graduated from college. He has an associate's degree. Jamie is an Eagle Scout. He just turned 30 this year. He learned to drive just like everybody else and drive. He has a better driving record than most of the people in this area. And he just drove to North Carolina this last weekend from here. It's about 250 miles each way. He drove to his sister's wedding in May, and that's a 1,200-mile round trip for him by himself. Jamie's an Eagle Scout. He lives independently. And so once he got moving and once he got in motion, there was no end to what he could do. And that's really what the chapter is about. It's telling that story of how teaching Jamie to ride a bike changed into so many other things that I think a lot of us can learn from. Because when we are thinking about doing something new, trying to overcome some obstacle or trying to do something we haven't done before, it's very easy to sit back on our training wheels and to never take that leap where we step out into what the unknown is. And it's like that time when you're standing on the top of the diving board over the pool, and it's really scary to jump out over that. And sometimes it would be easier just to go back down the ladder and be safe. But that's not where the fun is. The fun and the excitement and the adventure is on the other side of that. And you never find that out until you take that leap. So taking you off your training wheels allows you to take that risk. And once you do, it leads into so many other things. And that's what the story is about. There we go.
I love that you said that, because I think this anthology book was training wheels for some of the authors.
Mhm.
Think about it. If somebody was never an author before and they thought, that would be fun, but I have no idea what to do. Well,
Mhm.
what a better way than having the rest of us hold them up on their bike while they learn the ropes.
Oh, yeah. But eventually you do have to let go, because I found that holding Jamie up and trying to keep him safe, it was holding him back.
That's right.
And Jamie still has his challenges, like we all do. But by taking that leap, he was able to go so much further than people thought he could initially. And you're talking about a lot of the authors, this being their first time telling a story. When I joined Toastmasters, the reason I joined, this is back around 2011. I watched a movie called Speak, which is about the 2008 World Championships. And Mark Brown, one of the world champions, who I've gotten to know and who's been one of my coaches, at one point he looks into the camera and says, "Your life tells a story, and somebody out there needs to hear it." And that just resonated with me. And since then, I've been telling stories. And I would like to be able to tell fictional stories, but I'm not good at that. The stories that I tell are all based in real life, because everybody's life has a story behind it. And somebody else can benefit from that. So I'm trying to find out, with Jamie's story, with my story, with other stories, how does that, or how can that help other people find the same inspiration in their life so they can go do what they want to do?
I think that you can inspire other parents growing up with a child who has challenges,
Mm-hmm.
because you have successfully gone through that journey
Mhm.
although their journeys may be different than
Mhm.
yours, it all starts in the same place, is deciding that I am not going to take no for an answer, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things, people who know me know that I'm not good at accepting the word no. I can be a little bit stubborn and single-minded at times. But I'm also aware that sometimes you have to define what success means, right? Because, if I said my goal is to be an NBA basketball player, that ain't gonna happen, you know. I because there's certain things that I just don't have. But you can define what success means, and to say, I want my child to be happy and independent and productive. Well, let's figure out what that means and define that as we go, because we won't have all the answers. One thing I've told parents that I've worked with is, uh, you'll try 1,000 things that don't work, you know, and a few that do. When Jamie was growing up, I think we did try 1,000 things, and most of most of them didn't work. But there were some that did, and once we caught on to that, it's like, okay, that's where we're going. Um, that's what we should exploit, because that's what works. Because if I say this is the way we have to do it, um, that may or may not work. It may work for me. It may not work for other people. So that's one of the lessons I try to impart, is that just because something doesn't work doesn't mean you don't try something else.
Right. Edison said, I didn't fail 10,000
Mhm.
times. I learned 10,000 ways not to do it. And
And yeah,
that is
also, yeah,
that's
Thomas
the
Edison.
meaning
Yeah,
of
yeah,
life right there, is
yeah.
no one knows all the answers. You have to try.
And what Thomas Edison was also smart about is, this may be controversial, but you don't have to invent everything yourself. Learn from others' experience and leverage that, because somebody else has likely run into the problem you're experiencing, and figure out what they've done, where they've failed, where they've had challenges, and try not to make those mistakes, but capitalize on what they have learned and build on that. Because I can't I think it was probably Einstein who said, I've learned something like, I've learned something what I have because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, right? Is you learn from others' experiences. And if I've had an experience that somebody can learn from, I'm happy to share that.
So I assume that is why you wrote your chapter, because you want to share your experiences so people could stand on your shoulders. So those
Well,
are stronger from having done it.
and also it was, and Tatsuya may have some shared experience with this. Uh, my first Toastmasters contest that I did, this story is one of the ones I told, and I told it to win a contest. It was because as I tell people, it's a heck of a story. It happens to be true, and it was there was some humor in it. There were some other things in there that I thought were useful. And what surprised me was the number of people who would come up to me after and say, this impacted me because of our child, or a child we know. And I didn't realize at first, when I started telling the story, that it could have that sort of impact. And it goes back to what Mark Brown said, your life tells a story and someone out there needs to hear it.
And the beautiful thing about Seek the Heart book is it's in print. And it's not like a speech where you get up there and deliver and just the
Right,
people in the room hear it. This
right.
is a book that anyone could go on Amazon and purchase today. Please, and leave a review. Tetsuya, do you have anything to say? I would love to hear your ideas on David's speech, since nobody else was able to hear that.
I mean, I love David's speech when he gave it, and it still resonates with me. The idea that It's motion that's the key component, and all too often we get comfortable in, life's comfortable right now, right?
Oh
if
yeah.
and it's easy to sort of get um, you know unmotivated, so to speak. Look for you know ways to push yourself. It's kind of easy to mode of being where you're not pushing yourself.
That
And
comfort zone, that
yeah,
comfort, and that's the beauty of Toastmasters, is it pushes us right out of that comfort zone into doing
yes,
things that will help us
I
grow.
remember that. Yeah, so
And,
much. I did.
and
There was the very first speech I did for a contest in Toastmasters was about going skydiving, and um, I am uh, infamously afraid of heights. Um, I've I've gone, I've climbed down the diving board. We did a zip line tour in Honduras in Costa Rica with the kids, and I was okay to do the zip line because you're moving forward. But there's one thing we had to step off on a swing, and I couldn't do it. I had to climb back down the ladder. Um, so much so that the locals call me El Pollo Grande, the big chicken. And one of the things I learned about going skydiving and later, jumping off the Stratosphere Hotel in Las Vegas was that, you know, when you're sitting on one side of that door, the where you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's out there is the fun, the excitement, the adventure. They're on the other side, and you'll never get to experience those until you step through that door.
I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
back to your story, how did it feel as a father to let go for that first time, wondering if he would take off or not?
I think it was a mixture of panic and excitement because, you know, there's a lot of explaining to do if your kid crashes on your watch, right? No matter how many pads you put on them or how strong their helmet is, you still have to explain that you let your kid fall. But as a parent, it's really balancing that um, need for safety with also the need for growth. I mean, when you see birds push the fledglings out of the nest, you know, that is, I'm sure it's hard for the birds to do, but they know they need to do that. And when Jamie moved into his own place, I probably had him move a couple years earlier than he would have liked because I would rather handle the challenges that go along with that while we're all able to deal with that than to have something happen to me and him have to make that move. So it's you balance the discomfort and the fear with the need to grow because you don't experience the growth until you take that step.
That is a profound statement for all parents out there. I remember when I decided to join the Navy and my mom tried to talk me out of it. All these things she imagined could happen to me, like I'd shoot my foot off in boot camp. And then when the day came to go to boot camp and the recruiter came to our door and there's my mom crying in the doorway.
Right.
You could change your mind. You could change your mind. And if it was up to her, I wouldn't have gone. So do you have any word of advice for the parent who might be like my mom rather than you?
Well, it is to empathize with the parent. It is scary. It is hard to have your child step out into that space where they might fall. Um, but that's the whole thing. Ships are safe in the harbor. That's not what ships were built for. Um, your life is bigger than right here. There's in I think Khalil Gibran's on children. He said that your children will go onto a world that you can't visit, not even in your dreams. So they have a bigger story than you do. And as a parent, it's our job, it's our mission to prepare them for that journey that they will take at some point without us. It's hard to do, but I think it's necessary.
I was wondering if David, you could share with me how you sort of keep the sort of keep pushing yourself every day instead of like I go through sort of stages where I go through periods of seemingly periods of
Sure.
and then hit plateaus and then it's kind of stepwise. Do you have a way of sort of doing that on a daily basis?
That is always a challenge. I got to interview with Bear Grylls, the survivalist, because he has this amazing set of stories that he's been able to accomplish, or of things he's been able to accomplish that he's told stories about. And if I talk about Jamie's story or my recovery from motorcycle accident, they're a heck of story. They're amazing stories, and they happen to be true. But every day is not like that,
Right.
And
right.
the question that I asked Bear Grylls was that, how do you, because when we have something big thrown at us and we don't have a choice, lots of us will actually rise to the occasion because we have no other options, right? But when it's like, well, I'd like to do this, but I'm not motivated enough to. In the first book I wrote about recovering from the motorcycle accident and going on to run the Marine Corps Marathon, is the interviewer on Comcast Sportsnet said, what was the toughest thing about running a marathon? And I said, it wasn't recovering from the accident. It wasn't learning to walk again, which was hard. It wasn't training for even running the marathon. The hardest thing to do was getting off my butt and getting out the door every day. Once I got out the door, the rest was easy. And that ended up being the title of the book, was Get Out the Door. Because if you look at what big things are, they're really a set of small things built on top of each other.
Right. You got to go through the small steps.
And so if your question is, what motivates you every day, is do something. I don't care what it is, right? Do something. If you're like working on, building up to run a marathon, don't try to run a marathon.
Oh, yeah.
Run a block, run 60 yards, right? Do something, because once you do that, it becomes easier to do the next thing, which ended up being what I learned with Jamie's story, is once you get in motion, there's no stopping you.
Right.
And so my advice would be, do something, whatever it is. If you don't know what to do, something, right?
Yeah.
Because that may spark an idea. It's like, oh, that's the thing to do. Because I played guitar and piano since I was in high school, and I'm still learning. I'm still playing. I'm still trying to learn new things. And what motivates me is I hear something on the radio, I'm like, I'd really like to play that. And what's cool about the tools today is you can take that, you can slow it down. You can learn it. It's not some magic thing out there that you can't do. In most skills I've run into, if it's within the physical realm of possibility, there's a way to get it done. And that's what motivates me, is I love the idea of doing something tomorrow that I can't do today.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you for the question.
How did you get into into publishing? I mean, books.
That's been an interesting thing of itself, because the hardest thing about writing a book isn't writing the book. It's putting it together, coming up with the concept, seeing what resonates with other people. Because anybody can write a book, and lots of people do. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of god awful books out there.
Right. You only
Um,
a good one. All right.
yeah. And with AI, it's, now even you don't have to write the book.
Not
So
recommended, not recommended.
no, it is not recommended. No. What I think, again, go back to, again, I'm going to have to tell Mark Brown about this because I'm shilling for him at this point, is your life tells a story. Something about you is unique that somebody else may be able to benefit from. So tell your story, that's unique to you, because nobody else can take that.
Exactly.
And so the first book I wrote, I looked at, doing it completely self-published. I looked at vanity press things. I looked at, kind of mentorship things. And I started with a small press publisher, and we worked through a couple drafts of the book, and then we parted ways because we just had a different vision of what the book should be. And then a fellow Toastmaster became my editor, and we put together the book. And then I went with a company out of San Diego that did business publishing for the first book. For this one, for Seek the Heart, Francine and the rest of us, we worked with Kara O'Daniel, who put this one together. So you can write a story in an anthology book, which is what this one is. And I've done another anthology book with Rich Hopkins from Toastmasters. And then I did my full-length book, first full-length book, with a business publisher. So there are lots of different ways to get it done. And again, you can do it completely by yourself. I would recommend going with somebody who has some experience in it, so that you can put out a good product, because you have to be comfortable with the first version of your book being awful, but not letting that stop you.
Right.
Once you have a bad version, you can improve it. You can get feedback. You can
Craft is always important.
Yeah, you can get readers to preview your book and your story to say, here's what I don't understand. This isn't clear. And not to be afraid of that feedback, but to welcome it. Because even if they hate your book, they're going to have something useful to you, even if it's like, well, it's not for this audience, right? It's for a different audience, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So lots of different ways. And if you want to contact me outside of this, because you've got my info, I can give you some resources that may be helpful.
Okay. Thanks.
I'd like to put in a plug. I am working with a team, and we are doing an anthology. It's a 1-year program, and it starts from helping you develop your idea, get that 1,000 words on the page. In September, we're doing a live event here in Jacksonville, Florida. That is the pre-launch event where we'll do all the publicity photos and content creation and everything that's going to be involved with launching the book. And then we're also going to do the one thing that a lot of publishers forget to teach. We're going to teach you how to promote your book after it is launched. And the second half of the whole year program, the second 5 or 6 months, is going to be all about how to use your book or the book with your chapter in it to establish your credibility as an author, and maybe even write your own solo book, how to get on stages to promote whatever your solo venture is. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to pop a link in the chat when this video is up and running on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
There you go.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I think there's lots of different ways to get it done. And as Francine mentioned, a book by itself is just one thing. If you're a lot of speakers have books they use for either part of their business, or sometimes an entree into speaking engagements, and vice versa. Some people use speaking engagements to introduce people to their book. Some people use their book as kind of an entree into their coaching program. right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
right now, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with it? Because right now, I love telling stories. That's what I love doing. And um, I have to decide, okay, where do I want this to go? And people ask me if I have some grand plan. I am making this up as I go, literally, to figure out what is the benefit that other people can get from this. Because, you know, as I said earlier, you can publish on, on Amazon today, and get it out there. There's no barrier to it. It's very easy to do. But the thing I ask myself is, okay, why am I doing this? Is it just for me? If it's just for me, I've got other things to do. Um, I've got enough things in front of me that I'm busy. Um, but if other people can benefit from it, that's what really gives me a kick is like in Jamie's story, for parents who have children who have challenges in front of them, especially as they grow into adults, right? Because that's where I am right now. Jamie's an adult. And I have to relate with him in a different way. He has different challenges in front of him now, and navigate that journey with him and eventually help him to navigate that journey on his own because that's the way life works. With the first book, and with the first book I wrote is, you know, understanding what the challenges were there and what the benefits were at the end of that story and helping people find that. I'd like to take Jamie's story, which is a chapter in this book, and turn it into a full-length book and figure out what does that look like, because it could be any one of a number of things, from really just telling the story to telling the story with resources to direct people to working with people, maybe an expert in the industry, in a kind of a partnership there. And one idea that I would have to convince Jamie of is maybe he can write the book with me.
Oh, that would be
And
wonderful.
maybe we alternate chapters. Here's something in my voice as a parent, here's something in his voice, where he's an active participant in that. Because this is not, put your kid on display day. It is tell people about the journey, right? And see where that goes. I mean, that you could build a workbook from that. You could build a resource guide from that.
And on that note, we have a question in the chat, David.
Sure.
Can you discuss how you have helped other parents with children on the spectrum? Are there resources that helped?
Sure. There are far many resources today than there were, in the early 2000s when Jamie was younger, thankfully. So what I've done, there have been a number of families I've worked with to access benefits, because, there are, in the United States, there are a number of programs that parents can access to provide resources either through their health insurance or private pay or through governmental resources, that there's no real guidebook to help navigate that, because everything varies from state to state, from federal to state, from state to local, and it's hard to identify what things are out there and available. And so there's been a couple families here locally that, for access to Social Security, basically called SSI income, and Medicare waiver benefits. I've been through that process from soup to nuts. And so I've helped a couple of families with that. I've helped a couple of families access housing and to navigate through that process. And while it's not packaged for, consumption, by anybody, it is a process that can be reduced to, okay, here are the things you need to be aware of. Here are the things you need to consider. Here are the things that you can get access to, and here's how to do it. Because it can be fairly intimidating, and it's important to help people figure out how to navigate that, because it would be so much easier if every one of these agencies just had their roadmap out there. But sometimes people need help doing it.
Okay, I have a question. Did you find any resources that helped you navigate?
Some were better than others. There are some advocacy groups that are helpful. Like Autism Speaks is one of them. The ARC, I mean, the ARC has lots of locations around the country. I've been working with the ARC of Northern Virginia, the ARC. There's Easter Seals has resources available. County governments, like Fairfax County government, has resources available. They have a community services board that I've worked with. Is there a comprehensive? There are collections of websites that kind of list and catalog things. And if I do Jamie's book as a full length one, I'll probably have something published in there that said, here's how you find these resources, but also have kind of an ongoing online version of that, because that changes.
Okay, here's a plug for you, David.
Okay.
If you want these resources in one spot, put something in the comments and tell David, I need this. Maybe that will give him the push to get it done.
That's always fun. As I'll joke about it, say, oh no, more work, but the work is fun. The work is important. And going back to Tatsuya's comment about what helps motivate you to get something done. Sometimes it's just like, here, you've got to do this. I'm like, okay, there's nobody, sometimes there's nobody else to do it, right? And so there are things like that I will take on from time to time because, somebody, needs to do it. And that's the story I told about my mom is like, she, I can tell the whole story at some other point, but she went from being kicked out of nursing school when she was, just like 21, because she was married. And back in the 50s, you weren't allowed to be married and go to this particular nursing college. She worked in a factory for 35 years. She raised 4 kids for part of that time as a single parent. But when she retired, she went back to college and became a nurse. But she did what she had to do. And the tagline for that was, heroes do what needs to get done. Because they don't always wear capes, right? It is, if a hero does what's necessary. Not for the accolades, just because somebody's got to do it.